A number of South Africans are struggling financially due to the relentless cost of living. For most middle-income households, putting enough food on the table to feed the family, making their monthly income last until the end of the month, and finding a way to afford petrol is proving to be challenges. There is worrying evidence that suggests that the country's middle class and majority tax base may be shrinking. We're now joined by Economist and Business Analyst at Flux Trends, Bronwyn Wiliams. Bronwyn, thank you very much for your time this morning. This concept of the middle class, what are we talking about? Typically, what does the middle class enjoy?
Yes, so the middle class does suffer from various different definitions. By definition, it's the group in the middle of your socio-economic spectrum, so it's always there. However, the sort of economic resources the middle class controls and the kind of lifestyle they're able to live does shift over time. So in general, in South Africa, when we're talking about the middle class, we're talking about people who are earning anywhere from around about 5 to around about 20,000 rand a month. But I think it's also helpful in these conversations to add a definition of my own that I think helps make sense of what the middle class really is in society. I term this class to be the codependent class, or the class that has to work or trade for a living. In other words, they're employers or employees, people that have to earn an income, as opposed to the dependent class. This would be the now 45% of South Africans are dependent upon social grants or upon the charity of the state for survival. And at the other end, the very rarefied, very lucky sort of 0.1% of people who don't have to work for a living because they get to live off trust funds or capital assets instead of that. And I think that's why this class is so important for any discussion about the future of the economy, because this codependent trading and working class is your tax base. And our tax base, as you have mentioned, has been shrinking. In contrast to the sort of, as I said, 27 million odd South Africans who currently rely on social grants for survival, we've only really got a tax-paying base of around about 7.1 million taxpayers, give or take, depending on what you're kind of looking at there. But that's not a very sustainable figure, and that's why supporting and making sure the middle class is not just treading water, but actually surviving and growing and thriving is critical to development and to supporting all the people who rely on us for social grants going forward.
Okay. Please help us with these concepts, right? So you've got the working class, the middle class, and then the top tier that relies on trust funds and capital assets would be termed what?
The independent class, the lucky independent. So we can have it basically the independent, the codependent, and then the dependent class. And obviously a thriving society has more people contributing. Much like democracy, economies work better when it's run by people who are sharing in the fruits of that market. And that's what the challenge is with our middle class at the moment. It's under pressure. They are under threat of falling into the dependent class and losing that bit of independence that they had prior, largely due to the incredible increases in the cost of living. In this middle class group, which, as I said, if you want sort of numbers, is around about sort of 5,000 to 20,000 rand a month household income, which is not that much, but it's enough, or it was enough to get by. At least it was in the past. From 2016 till to date, which is almost a decade, the average middle class home in South Africa has lost, in real terms, 40% of their purchasing power. That means you basically have you're living off today 60% of what you were living on 10 years ago. So lifestyles have decreased. The quality of life for the middle class has decreased, and many more of them were living in more and more precarious terms. This is due to basically two things. One, increasing indebtedness among this class of codependent working class people. We're now finding that in that sort of middle income bracket, these households are spending around 66% of their income just servicing debt. In other words, that's just sort of treading water. That doesn't give you very much flexibility or fat to play with when the cost of living increases or when interest rates increase, as we have been seeing over the last few years. Debt kind of locks you into sort of fixed expenditure and makes it very difficult to get ahead, to save, to invest, and to improve your quality of life going forward. So the indebtedness is being compounded by increasing interest rates, but they're also being squeezed on the other side from inflation and from shrinkflation. So we've had a huge inflationary cycle here in South Africa. A lot of that is due to our challenges with electricity. Electricity, of course, and energy underpins the entire economy. So when the cost of energy goes up, of course, the cost of everything goes up. But our inflationary environment has also been exacerbated by global macroeconomic and political conditions. The wars going on in Gaza and Ukraine have added costs to the global supply chain, which ends up costing us in South Africa here. Likewise, we are still suffering the costs of COVID monetary policies was implemented by governments much stronger than ours that we have no control over.
Okay. Sure.
The increase of money supply of the dollar has washed across the rest of the world and has also ended up increasing the price of basic goods, particularly goods things like food, electricity, and housing have all increased dramatically over, again, the last decade. Some of that's our own fault. In South Africa, as I said, the electricity issue, some of that is a global macroeconomic environment, but all this is compounding.
If you'd allow me to please join you, unfortunately I'm getting instruction that we've got 3 minutes left of the interview, and so why do we still call it the middle class? 5 to 20,000 rand that people earn a month, anything from 5 to 20,000 rand. You speak of their lifestyles decreasing, you speak of debt, 60% of income being spent on servicing debt. Why then are they still called the middle class?
Well, but it's because they fit in the middle of the socioeconomic spectrum. So that middle, the overall quality of life has shifted for the whole of society, right? But there's still the majority in the middle, or the 50%, in the 50th sort of percentile, from say your 25th percentile to your 75th percentile. So that middle is always there, but how their lifestyles are playing out and their quality of life is diminishing. But the number of people that are within that bracket, that diminishing sort of defined bracket, but still that bracket is always constant. There is always a middle in any population distribution.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the working class, a population of 27 million, codependent class, middle class, 7.1 million, and that's the tax base, not sustainable. Independent class, what's the number there?
That's a lot harder to get an actual number on, but we are talking like very small percents. We do know those crazy statistics that say that our top tax bracket individuals, the high net worth individuals in this country, could all fit into one soccer stadium. So that's about how few they are compared to the majorities that we're talking about.
So less than 1 million, less than 500,000?
They're in about.
All right. So if we take a look at this, because marketers love this kind of information, more so when they need to sell their products, including debt to the so-called middle class, who it would appear from what you have outlined is actually the working class. When we speak of the sustainability of this, is it really sustainable? Because the information and the numbers, they're not making sense.
No, the maths here isn't mathing at all when you give up these numbers. Unless our economy starts growing, none of this is sustainable. A lot of retailers have propped up their numbers artificially by giving the already over-indebted middle classes that, as they are already servicing 60% of their income towards debt, they're offering them new unregulated credit opportunities, things like buy now, pay later services or early access to payroll services. All of these things just kick the debt can further down the road and add extra debt and extra financial pressure onto already overextended classes. So retailers are able to sort of hide a lot of the unsustainability of our economy by actually sort of exacerbating the very problems that have got us into this place in the first place.
Thank you so much, Bronwyn, for your time this morning. Bronwyn Wiliams is with Flux Trends, speaking about the growing financial pressure on the so-called middle class in South Africa.